From Leesburg, Virginia, Loudoun debates. Today's debate, Chair of the Board of Supervisors. Your candidates are Sam Kroiz and Gary Katz. Brought to you by the Coalition of Loudoun Towns, the Loudoun Times-Mirror, and Loudoun Now. Live streaming provided by Jeff in High Def.
As the mayors of the towns here in Loudoun County, we feel very strongly that our democratic process is very important, and so we wanted to organize these debates around all the Board of Supervisor races that had opponents. And this is our last one tonight, and we are very grateful that you're here. I would like to introduce, we have in the audience, Mayor Vance is here from Hillsborough, and Supervisor Umstadt is here from the Loudoun County Board. Our questioners tonight are Ken Wine from Hamilton, and we have Norm Stiers from Loudoun Now, and Coy Fallon from Leesburg Today. Oh my gosh, Loudoun Times-Mirror. I'm telling you, it's the last one. I'm exhausted. I'm truly exhausted. I apologize. I'm sorry. And of course, our two candidates, and I'll try to get their names right. Gary Katz is here today. And Sam Kroiz. Right, thank you. I had a friend who spelled her name that way and pronounced it totally different, so I wanted to hear what you had to say, so thank you very much. But we're very anxious to hear from our candidates tonight. The format is going to be that each candidate will have a 2.5-minute opening statement and a 2.5-minute closing statement. After the opening, we will start asking the questions, and the first person that answers the question, that is selected to answer the question, has 90 seconds, and the second person has 60 to rebut it, and then we'll switch to the next person. The next question. We will determine who goes first by the coin toss. So I'm going to ask Katz, do head or tails? Heads. All right. Hold on first. I can't do both. And it is heads. So you may start first, or you may decline and let Mr. Kroiz start. You still end last, either way. Okay. You will start first, okay? All right. Then we will start with your opening remarks of 2.5 minutes, and I will keep the time. And the old teacher in me will, you keep to the time. Yes, so you may start.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mayor Burke. Thank you, panelists. This is on. Yes, it is. Okay. So very first, I want to thank the COLT organization for organizing this. I want to thank Sam as well for coming out tonight. Debates are an important part of the democratic process. And if you're going to lead people, they deserve to hear what you have to say, and they deserve to hear what your views are. So I think this is incredibly important that we're holding this event. And again, I thank Sam for attending. I think it's worth noting who's not attending right now, and I think that that's important to note. Phyllis Randall is not here tonight. She should be here. She says she wants to lead Loudoun County for another term. I don't think she wants to lead Loudoun County. I think that she wants to leave Loudoun County's Board of Supervisors as she seeks congressional office. So she owes answers to these questions about what her level of commitment is to Loudoun County, whether she is running for Congress or whether she is running for the Board of Supervisors and will serve her entire term. The other challenge here is that debates are a forum for accountability. It's a forum where you get asked questions by the public, by the media, about what your intentions are and where you stand on issues. And I think that Phyllis Randall has been avoiding this for a multitude of reasons. She's avoiding it because she doesn't want to answer the question about her congressional aspirations. And she doesn't want to answer questions from a media that has rightly criticized her for a reckless disregard and abuse of public money. So It's unfortunate that she is not here in order to answer those questions, and there's more to say on that later. But bottom line is that Loudoun deserves better, and that is why I stood up to ensure that that could be checked. There are a lot of issues that we're here to talk about tonight beyond this scope. Loudoun County has a great many issues that are facing it right now, many of which that are entirely avoidable. And the challenge is that the current board has been pretty vitriolic to our business community. It has been pretty vitriolic at times towards our towns, and it's been divisive. And we deserve a return to normalcy. We deserve a return to government where people can actually have faith that their leadership is doing the right thing by people for their own, for the people's interests, not their own self-interests. So this is a fundamental problem that currently this board does not appear to understand
Mr. Katz,
the basics.
your time is up.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to Mayor Burke. Thanks to Colt. Thanks Loudoun Now and Loudoun Times for putting this on. And yeah, I'd also like to thank Mr. Can you hear me? Further away? Too loud? Is this just right? All right. Get the Goldilocks spot. I'd like to thank Mr. Katz also for attending. And it is disappointing that Chair Randall isn't here. I think it is insulting to voters. But from my perspective, it really doesn't make that much of a difference because I'm running for office as an independent because it doesn't really, with the biggest issues that Loudoun faces, it really doesn't make a difference whether Chair Randall wins or Mr. Katz wins. Both the parties are the problem. So many, pretty much developers are running the show in Loudoun. They're getting sweetheart deals left and right, most of the time with bipartisan, unanimous support from the board. I live in the rural area. One of the biggest things that's happened in the last few years to me is that Chair Randall has repeatedly moved the boundary of the transition area and the rural area, allowing the suburban area to encroach into the rural area. And that has a lot of impact for me as a farmer in the rural area, but it also has a lot of impact countywide. And I'll explain that later. But when she moved it for the first time, since there was a line back in 2019, that was with the Republican-controlled board. Many Republicans voted for it. And then they unanimously said no future board should ever move the line again. And then just a few months ago, believe it or not, they moved the line again. And Chair Randall voted for that. And that was with a Democrat board that passed that. So to me, both parties are the problem. I'm running as an independent candidate to offer voters an alternative to that. Mr. Katz is right, everything that he was saying about serving the people, but you really can't do that when you get elected because you're a Republican. It's not his fault. He didn't expect to be running, a few weeks ago, but
Mr.
nobody
Kroiz,
knew who he was until a few weeks
your
ago.
time is up also.
So, okay, thank you.
I've neglected to say that there was an invitation extended to the chair and she declined. So our first questioner tonight, who's starting? Okay, Mayor Wine.
Loudoun County is a diverse county with lots of needs. What do you think is the most important issue or issues facing Loudoun County today?
And this would be answered by Sam first.
Thanks for the question. So picking up where I left off, the biggest problem that is facing Loudoun County today is that no matter who wins the election, in most cases, you get the same result. So whether Chair Randall wins, who is her campaign is fueled by developers or past campaigns, this time it's an assortment of other special interests, or whether Mr. Katz wins, it really doesn't make a difference. You're going to have a partisan person in office where, to me, it's not so much a get back to normal because it's always been so partisan, and we've had decision-making being made in the service of campaign contributors for a long time. So it's really not get back to normal, as it's time to leave the parties behind entirely, and you can do that by voting for an independent candidate. Mr. Katz says a lot of stuff about serving independently, and every partisan politician says, oh, I'm not going to let the party boss me around, but they all get bossed around by the party. And the candidates are funded by developers, but it's also important to note that the parties themselves are funded by developers. So, Mr. Katz only entered the race. I can't see his campaign finance. He hasn't filed any campaign finance yet.
Sam, your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to break rule for one moment. Would you like to be called Mr. Kroiz or Sam? Okay, you can call me Gary. That's fine. Okay. All right, so I want to acknowledge what Sam has said about party affiliation. The fact of the matter is, this is local politics. This is not national politics. These are local issues that are dealing in affordable housing and transportation and zoning. This is not about Republican versus Democrat or left versus right. This is not about that at this level of government. It really isn't the impactful component of this, in my opinion. However, to answer the question as asked, I believe the absolute most glaring issue we have in Loudoun County right now is the zoning ordinance rewrite that is going to cause economic contraction within Loudoun. The bottom line is, we are rushing through a zoning ordinance rewrite that, while perhaps well-intentioned to consolidate 3 different zoning ordinances together, are fundamentally going to cause problems for our commercial economic base, and that is going to result in higher taxes and a higher cost of living for residents of Loudoun County. That, to me, is the most alarming thing that we have. If we do not have a business community that feels that they are welcome in Loudoun County.
And Gary, I'm afraid your time is up. Second question, Gary, we'll go to you.
It's going to follow up a little bit on the topic you were just talking about. So we know the county a lot of its time dealing with planning and zoning issues. And for nearly 3 years, the county's been working on the new zoning ordinance rewrite, which came out of the new comprehensive plan developed that they adopted. The next board, or this one, is going to adopt the new zoning ordinance. And you raised concerns about it. What 3 things does the current draft ordinance have wrong? And what are your priorities? What do you see your zoning priorities for next board?
Did you get any of the question at all?
I did, but do you want to repeat the question so that folks can hear? That's fine. Do you want to use my mic?
Nope, that's over there. Things in the ordinance. What does it have right? 3 things that it's doing right, and 3 things that you have concerns about being changed in the zoning ordinance. Okay,
great question. I don't think that it's doing 3 things right. I think that it's doing 1 thing right. I think that the notion of consolidating the 1972, 1993, and revised 1993 ordinances into one so that you don't have to juggle multiple ordinances together is notionally a good thing, because that's complicated and that's hard for planners and zoners and for folks to be able to manage that. The problem is the execution of the zoning ordinance rewrite, as well as the speed with which it's being rushed through. So things that it has wrong. LCPS has mentioned that it's going to make it difficult for, be able to use fields for sporting and events. The commercial, industry has said that it's going to make it harder to expand office space. The agricultural business has said it's going to go and limit, they have to put requirements on how much of a particular product is grown in a particular area so that they can actually go and sell, in a winery or a brewery. What happens if there's a flood and someone's crop is completely ruined? They're not able to go and buy that crop from the person who's down the road from them who didn't get flooded out, so then they can go and continue on with their business. It's draconian and prescriptive, and maybe it's a one-size-fit-all approach where it's easy for someone within zoning to be able to say, check, 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 this is, you meet the
Gary,
criteria.
I'm afraid your time is up. Do you need the question repeated?
No, that's okay. So like Gary was saying, local politics shouldn't be about party, but when you're elected because of your party affiliation, then it is. You can't help. So he's right that it shouldn't be about party, but when you're voting for a party candidate, it is about the party. So I think that it shouldn't be about the party, but the way to actually enact that is that you have to vote for an independent candidate like me. Now, Gary, I think, is right in that the zoning ordinance is really half-baked in a lot of different ways. It's hard to pick just three, and it's also complicated because they keep pulling little bits out of it where it's like, oh, we're going to consider that separately, like data centers, should they expand further south? They're talking about these rural uses. Let's pull that out and consider it separately. There's so much wrong with it. Once you pull all those things out.
Sam, I'm afraid your time is up.
Yeah, I'm really ambivalent about whether they pass the skeleton or not.
All right, our next question is Sam. It goes to Sam first.
All right, so can you hear me? Yes? All right. So the next question is about data centers, which are obviously a big part of the zoning ordinance rewrite and any zoning-related matter. So Loudoun is the world's data center capital, and property taxes paid by data centers pay for a significant portion of county services. Some county residents have expressed concern that facilities have a negative impact on the environment, especially because of the high demand for electricity and the transmission infrastructure that goes along with it, that they're not aesthetically pleasing, and that they drive land values too high in eastern Loudoun County. The Loudoun County Department of Economic Development has stated that nearly doubling data center square footage from about 30 million square feet to about 50 million would be appropriate for Loudoun. Do you agree with that assessment from the Department of Economic Development? And how would you address the community concerns about data centers?
Okay, so the story of Loudoun is that both parties, politicians from both parties, campaigns are funded by developers. Now, these developers in eastern Loudoun rezone properties. So a property in eastern Loudoun is for X number of houses, let's say 100 houses. The developer comes in and says, how about I build 1,000 houses? And they say, okay, but you have to give us a certain amount of money, and there's a formula for, based on that number of houses, how much money the developer should have to pay for roads, schools, and all that kind of infrastructure. But every time the board gets substantially less than the developer is supposed to pay. So that's a shortfall that we're having to pay all those, all that extra money that the developer should be paying and is not paying. So pretty much any issue that we're going to talk about tonight is a matter of using resources, where you spend resources. And every politician will say, oh, well, we're going to do more, we're going to give you more for less taxes, but none of them will address the root cause of the problem that I'm identifying because they're all fueled by developer money. Now, we've been doing this for so long, and the reason our taxes are so high, but they would be even higher, and we would be at even more of a crisis situation if it wasn't for the data centers. So the data center revenue has been bailing us out.
I'm afraid your time is up at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so quickly, I'm going to address one point. People vote for policy over party and local politics, and whether you are an independent, Republican, or Democrat, you're still a politician, regardless. So you can't get away from that. Second, on the data center question, nobody wants a data center next to their house, right? I understand the concept here. You don't want to be like, here's the basketball court, here's the pool, and oh look, the playground next to the data center. Like, that's not a way to sell your home. That's not appealing. At the same time, we can't be vitriolic to the data center community that has served us so well. And where it makes sense for us to be able to invest in data centers that will contribute to our economic growth, that makes a lot of sense. We just have to be judicious about it. We're at risk of scaring off the data center community who would be looking in places like Ohio or Virginia Beach or other places to relocate. If the data centers left overnight in Loudoun County, we would see a 63.4% increase in our property taxes overnight. Everyone who's upset about data centers right now would be really upset if they wound up leaving. So we need to find and strike the right balance with respect to the data center community and resident
And
concerns.
Gary, your time is up.
Made time that time. That's great.
There are 7 towns in Loudoun County, and tonight's debate was organized by the 7 mayors from those towns. So it's important for us to understand your position on the towns as partners. What role do you see for the county regarding towns whose residents pay county taxes, just like all of Loudoun residents?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I live in one of the towns, so I actually understand the benefits of the towns within Loudoun County. Idly, where we are right now, is one of the benefits of living in Leesburg. It's a beautiful facility and it's charming and there's lots of places to go. The towns are draws in terms of bringing people to Loudoun from a tourism standpoint. The towns are charming and they're cute and people like to go visit and antiquing and they like to go and see what's out. I think the problem is that we've got, a communication and relationship problem. From what I have observed, it feels to me that there is a distant relationship between the Board of Supervisors and the town mayors with respect to what the priorities are. Now, some of this may be unsolvable in terms of the problems. Some of these could very well be solvable if we had a better relationship and less angry and divisive environment where we weren't being dismissive of the towns and their priorities and the mayors involved. So I think that some of this is 100% avoidable. My priorities with respect to the towns in the county would be to facilitate dialogue on those fronts because I love the towns. I think the towns are charming, they're cute. I live in one, I understand the perks. I don't want the towns to be disadvantaged. And yes, we do pay higher taxes in the towns. I don't love paying higher taxes in the towns, but I do love living in the towns, and so do the people who are there. So we should be making it something where there's a better relationship between towns and the Board of Supervisors.
Thanks. So yeah, like I was saying with the data centers, we're in a position where we have to keep approving data centers all over the place because of the corner that we backed ourselves into by all these giveaways to developers. Now, I'm an independent candidate, and I guess I'm wearing a suit, I'm on stage, so I guess that makes me a politician, but my campaign is a lot different. The biggest thing is that I'm not taking any campaign donations from developers, any special interests, anybody with any business before the board. I won't even take more than $1,000 from any individual. And I'm also not affiliated with any party that's taking money from all these places. So that makes a big difference. And I think in terms of the towns, to answer the question, where they get into trouble is when the interests of the towns butt up against the interests of one of the special interests that the supervisors are getting campaign money from, where then, yeah, that
Sam,
is
I'm
pretty
afraid your
tough.
time is up.
But that won't be a problem for me. Thank you.
We'll go back to one more data center topic. The Dulles Cloud South is a proposal supported by the Department of Economic Development to convert nearly 500 acres of the transition policy area, land that's currently off limits to data centers, to allow for millions of additional square feet of data center development. Do you support this project? Why or why not?
No, I don't support that. So there's, well, actually, there used to be 3, now there's 4 policy areas in Loudoun. The newly added one was the urban, so you have urban, suburban, transition, and rural policy area. Now, I am running for office because Chair Randall twice now, and including one time after promising not to, has moved the rural transition boundary, and that's with a Democrat board did that and a Republican board. So I'm not happy about moving that boundary, but I don't want to move any boundaries anywhere in Loudoun. We need to keep these boundaries where they're at. And now the transition area, there seems to be some confusion where some people seem to think, well, okay, let me go back to the beginning. When the transition area was created, it was supposed to be a transition between the suburban area and the rural area. So it's kind of has some aspects of both. And as you're going through, you're transitioning. Now, some people seem to think that transition means that it's supposed to transition from that use to something else like data centers. And that's totally not what it was ever meant for and not what it should be, and it should stay the way that it is. No data centers, and also no expanding the suburban housing densities into that area. And importantly, some people think when
Sam,
you don't
your
want
time is
houses
up, I'm afraid.
Okay, to be continued. Thank you.
So I would absolutely support it. The reason for that is simple. There are 2 substations. There's already overhead transmission lines that are there. And it would more than double, almost triple the revenue that comes from the data centers themselves. And that would be very, very useful from an economic, commercial-based standpoint for Loudoun County. That would keep all of our property taxes much lower. Now, the piece of this that's concerning that I think a lot of folks get up about is that we can't treat the transition policy area as a moat between eastern and western Loudoun when it makes good sense to take a certain piece of it and use it for something that can benefit everybody. That particular region where Dulles Cloud South is, there aren't many residential areas there. It's perfectly well suited to it. That makes sense. We can't be afraid to make good business decisions for the county because of the concept that if you give a mouse a cookie, it'll want a glass of milk. That is the wrong strategy for Loudoun County.
Thank you. Next one is Gary. He goes first. Sorry.
No, it's fine. And on a related note, do you believe it is possible to retain Western Loudoun as a permanent rural area? And what policy action should the next board take toward that end?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that preserving rural Loudoun as a rural area is possible. And I think that there are certainly ways to do that effectively. I think conservation easements are probably the most simplest approach, as well as simplified zoning to that end, to make that, stay the rustic, idyllic area that we'd like it to be without overcrowding and overdensity. I don't know that I support, keeping it completely in a vacuum. I think that there are certain things that we need to be mindful of resident concerns on as it pertains to things like public safety, right, where we may need to make enhancements to ensure that, hey, we're going to have an area in rural Loudoun where there might be children playing. So I know lighting is a big issue. We want to make sure that we're doing that appropriately and in the right spots where it's not offensive to folks who live there for the serenity and the peaceful life that's in rural Loudoun. At the same time, we can't have kids who are going and tripping all over the place and getting hurt and injured. So there's a balance that happens there that if done judiciously, I believe can be done well while preserving quality of life in Western Loudoun. I'll yield my time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so it definitely is possible to keep rural Loudoun rural, but I will say that it's not possible with partisan leadership from either side. With the data centers, Gary is talking about expanding data centers into the transition area. Well, I'm afraid to say that we're kind of going to have to if we don't stop giving these developer giveaways. Now, I'm saying let's stop the developer giveaways, and then we won't be put in the position where we have to expand data centers. But Gary doesn't want to stop the developer giveaways, or he can't. And so, he's kind of feels that we're going to have to move into that area. And the same thing is true with the rural area. Even though with these developments, we're not getting the money that we're supposed to be getting, but we do get the money kind of up front where the costs come later. So that's why it's like, why are they accepting $10 million when they should be getting $20 million? And it's because, well, I can get $10 million right now, and I have the cost from the last project I have to pay. So there's all this pressure.
I'm afraid your time is up.
And I would love to hear Gary say that.
I'm afraid your time is up.
Many of the board members do not have a town in their districts, and some might not understand the value of towns to the county. What would you do to make sure that town residents receive the county services they pay for in county taxes when the majority of the board members do not represent towns?
Thanks. So yeah, I would love to hear Gary promise that he won't move the transition rural area boundary. for what it would be worth. Chair Randall already promised not to move it once, and then she moved it again. So, but it would still be nice to hear him promise not to move the boundary. But it's basically by doing these developer giveaways, you're put in this position where you almost have to do that, and you have to serve the party and your contributors, where I won't have to do that. And so that applies to people in towns, but it's kind of the same as the public generally. As an independent and not having all these campaign contributions, I'll be able to serve the public interest everywhere, but also in towns. And I do agree that the towns aren't getting the best deal right now, so that is a problem, and I do promise to address that.
So I'm going to make a quick comment here, Sam. I think that if I promised to do anything, the response would very likely be that I'm bathed in partisan blood and probably would never keep to it anyhow. So I don't think that even if I were to make promises that it would matter all that much. The reality is, I think that if there was a board full of independents, there would still be things done that you didn't like. And then who do we run? Do we run back to the party politics at that point? I don't know. So the answer to the question about towns and the supervisors is you're right. There are not a lot, there are many supervisors who don't have towns in their jurisdictions. That is a function of communication and bringing them out to understand the value that's seen. Frankly, I think there's a little bit of hubris on some of the board members for not going out and visiting the towns and understanding the value that they provide. That comes down to a willingness to engage, and that's something that we've not seen from several of the members of this Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
The current board voted to allow county employees to negotiate collective bargaining agreements if they choose. How should your board handle collective bargaining in the upcoming term?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear part of it.
The current board voted to allow county employees to negotiate collective bargaining agreements if they choose. How should your board handle collective bargaining in your term?
Yeah, so collective bargaining, and particularly like the project labor agreements that the current board is looking at right now, are concerning to me at several levels. On the one hand, I like the training that goes with unions and collective bargaining and groups that are doing that. They actually put a lot of emphasis there. And certainly I don't like the concept of wage theft for folks who may not be treated well when they're working projects. But at the same time, it's difficult for me to reconcile that within Loudoun County compared to what unions typically do in creating effectively voting blocks. So I sense that they're quite a bit more politicized and in the interest of politicians in that regard than they are really for the worker. So I think that there needs to be a balance there between, hey, what are the things that they do right, so that you can protect wages and things like that, but do we really want to put ourselves in a position where we're effectively creating more special interests, if you will? And I would actually agree with Sam about the value of the challenge of special interests. I think that this creates more special interests that will ultimately become more problematic for Loudoun County. I do want to make one other note. When my campaign finances do come out, you'll be pleased to see that I have no money from developers, so I'm not really sure where that's coming from. But yes, special interests will be facilitated by collective bargaining and project labor agreements, and that's going to complicate issues, not simplify them.
Yeah, so it's true that Gary hasn't had any campaign finance filings yet, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's no developers, but I'm just basing that on all the other Republicans on the board. But if you look at who they're funded by, and even the candidates, the big one is Main Street, Virginia, PAC. They're the top donor to most of the Republicans on the board. Now, they're probably not giving Gary any money because they don't think he has any chance to win, and that's probably a smart move. But to get to the question, unions is a place where the partisanship really comes into play, where the Chair Randall has, I think, $30,000 this election, and I think it was $60,000 plus last election from unions. We're doing this project labor agreement pilot program where we're doing one to try it out, but
Sam, I'm afraid your time is up.
all right.
Next question.
I'm going to take it back to land use, as I so often do. The board made zoning decisions 2 and 3 decades ago that assumed market demand for certain kinds of non-residential developments, like shopping centers and office complexes in eastern Loudoun County. Much of that demand has not panned out, and the board has recently considered several applications seeking to rezone land either for data centers or for more dense housing developments. Many of these applications have centered on, quote, infill developments or redevelopment projects of less than about 20 acres. So how would you approach these applications, and what concrete ideas or actions should the next board take when reviewing these applications that the current board isn't doing?
Oh man, that's an easy question. The board should demand from developers the amount of money to pay for the associated costs of the project that they're routinely not getting every time. That is driving our lack of resources, where we're always having to choose between this and that, why we're stuck in traffic, overcrowded schools, even though our taxes are through the roof. Like I was saying, Chair Randall took $30,000 this election from unions, $60,000 last time. No matter what happens with this project labor agreement, she's going to be for more of them. No matter in terms of the collective bargaining of the county employees, that's a separate issue. But to me, it's all about what value would the union give to the citizens, who I'm serving. But she's just all about what's good for the union. Now, Gary was acting like maybe he'd be open to the union, but he can't be. As a Republican, he's going to be anti-union no matter what. So I'm looking at it as a fair-minded arbiter looking out for the best interests of the public. So as a small business owner, I do know that sometimes if you spend money to get a better product, it's all about the value. So anything having to do with unions, I'll be looking at what can the unions do for the public and not what can the unions
Your
do
time
for
is
my
up.
campaign.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm going to spend much more time trying to explain that I actually do make up my own mind versus just follow what a particular party says. If I haven't demonstrated that to folks by now, then I guess those folks won't vote for me. So from infill perspective, I think that needs to be done in conjunction with the community, right? Does it fit the aesthetic of the community and the needs of the community in terms of what they actually want to see? In terms of the rezoning, I'd like to see more commercial rezoning, meaning create more commercial lots available. The challenge is that we have very, very low vacancy rates for our commercial, zoning land parcels. And the problem is that we need the commercial revenue from there. So if businesses want to come to Loudoun, they need to know that there's enough space for them to actually be here. And that is a significant problem that we have in attracting businesses to Loudoun. So if we're going to rezone, we should be rezoning more to commercial instead of rezoning to residential so that we can actually support the business.
Your time is up. Next question.
Although many people are working hybrids, the traffic in Loudoun County is still a major problem for residents, employees, and employers. What would you do to bring more solutions to the county to solve the traffic backup, and what would those solutions be?
Yeah, so traffic is a problem. I like the idea of, certainly the Route 15 North widening project. I think that is very important. I think that's important because we need to be able to make it so that one accident doesn't block up the whole road, not just from a convenience standpoint, but also from a safety standpoint. Emergency vehicles can't get to certain localities if there's a traffic backup. It's going to delay response times and so forth. I think that the traffic and congestion is actually one of the largest functions of the Board of Supervisors. It used to be the case that federal monies came in so that we could actually support transportation projects. Unfortunately, those monies kind of moved away, and now we have to kick in for the past 10, 12, 15 years, something like that, kick in our own dollars to do that and fund it, and that's a significant responsibility from a local standpoint to make sure that we actually do have roads that are accessible and that can be driven and that are enabling safe passage from point to point. So I would see us continuing to move and invest in transportation projects in Loudoun County, even though I do think that it would be nice if the federal and state partners did kick in some for that. Ultimately, that's going to be a local concern. I yield.
Yeah, so this, the road projects that the county's been paying for is the ballooning part of the budget that, a decade or two ago, we didn't spend any money on that. It was all funded by state and federal. And that is just driven by the number of roads that we have to build to keep up with the number of people that were here. And the developers should be paying for it, but they're not for the reasons that I've outlined. So we need to stop that problem at the source of the problem, which is stop these developer giveaways that both parties are doing because they're both fueled by developers. But in the meantime, they're approving new projects all the time, and they've approved so many in the past years that we have the traffic issues we're dealing with today. So we need to scale back on the spending on traffic, but that goes, the county budget is exploding. It's growing double digits.
Your time is up at this. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions on taxes? What specific changes, if any, should the next board implement to the county's operating budget and our property tax rates to relieve the burden on homeowners? Do you have concerns that such a high percentage of our tax revenues are tied to data centers, a technology which could change rapidly?
Yeah, so that picks up right where I left off. It's, the budget is ballooning. We need to slow it down, but we need to do it across the board. There's a few places that we can get some easy cost savings. Like for one thing, foreign travel would be one. Now it's easy to criticize Cherry Randall for 5-star hotel stays and business class flights. But I'm, as far as I know, the only one that's promised. I'm not going to go on any foreign travel at all. I'm not even going to leave the state to go to any other states besides the ones that border Loudoun. The economic development professionals can handle that. Now, I would like to hear Gary promise not to do that as well, but I don't think he will, because I assume that he'll probably do the same thing in office. So that's the easy one. We can save some money on that, but that's small. That's small change. So we really need to address the root cause of the problem, which is these developer giveaways that both sides are doing nonstop. We have got to stop these developer giveaways. And then we need to reduce spending across the board. And I will start with myself by promising to donate half my salary either to charity or back to the county. The board salaries are
your time is up.
way too high.
Thank you. Your time is up.
45 minutes in, and Sam and I have found a point of agreement. So I'm not going to belabor this on foreign travel, although goodness do I hope that there's a question on that. I think this question is actually too important to waste on just the foreign travel. The fact of the matter is we need a strong economic base in order to keep our taxes lower, and we are threatening our business community, and we are scaring them away. They're not going to want to continue to invest. The best way for us to keep our taxes lower and provide better value to Loudoun County residents is to make sure that we have a thriving commercial base within Loudoun. That is being compounded by the ZOR, the zoning ordinance rewrite. It's being compounded by the fact that we have exceedingly low vacancy rates. We need to start moving and creating more flex industrial and commercial spaces so the businesses can move into Loudoun. We pay a lot of lip service to diversifying the Loudoun economy. The best way to do that is to not only invest in data centers, but also invest in other commercial zoning.
Okay. Is tax revenue is it ever appropriate to spend tax revenue for board members to travel on behalf of economic development trips and/or sister city trips? And I'm using the word tax revenue, and you can interpret that however you need to.
I think that Supervisor Umstad's motion that would have put regulations on the travel would have quelled the great majority of the problems that presented themselves. I can't say that it would never be appropriate. If there was going to be some multi-mega international corporation that said, hey, we really want to come to Loudoun County, we want to be like another Telos corporation, which is headquartered here, and that required a trip to go to that country and have that conversation, and you were right at the cusp of signing the deal, although practically speaking, they'd probably come to you, but be that as it may, I won't say that it's never appropriate. I'd say that there needs to be guardrails in place and there needs to be oversight. No one should have complete autonomy over a budget where there's absolutely no accountability. And frankly, with respect to the tax dollars that were used for Chair Randall, she basically used the restricted transient occupancy tax as her personal slush fund, and she used the EDA as her banker, and that is completely inappropriate. We need to have oversight on all of this to make sure that it's being used and invested wisely for the economic growth of Loudoun County and not the economic growth of other localities or to turn the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors into the Travel and Vacation Club.
Oh, well, that would have been a great opportunity to promise not to do any foreign travel, but I guess we're not going to get that promise from Gary. But to repeat it, you will get it from me. I won't be traveling anywhere. The problem with the chairman and the Board of Supervisors traveling abroad is that the role of the chairman and the Board of Supervisors is they basically have the county's checkbook, right? So it's up to us to determine, is this money well spent on anything or another? Now, when you look at, is this foreign trip worth the money, it's a bit of a conflict of interest if you're the one that's going on the trip, right? So it's an inherent conflict of interest, and that's why it's very easy for me to say, I'm not going on these trips. Now, we have a whole bunch of economic development professionals that I think they can, maybe I can look at their budget and say, okay, this is money worth spending. I think they can do a great job. I think there's technologies like
And your
Zoom.
time is up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Loudoun County is made up of different communities with different needs and issues. How do you intend to recognize those needs and to meet those needs?
Yes, it's a diverse county, and that's great. And it comes down to what I've been talking about, where as an independent and without a bunch of campaign contributions from various places, I can serve the public interest. Part of that is, another thing I'll promise tonight, is that I will go once a month to have a town hall style meeting in different parts of the county to hear what citizens have to say. And an important part of that is to show up and maybe get yelled at if you do something wrong, which, Chair Randall is not fond of, apparently. But, so I'm going to do that. A lot of people are scared to do that because they're all the time serving these special interests, their campaign contributors, and not the public interest. When you actually serve the public interest, it's pretty easy to do. Even if somebody's not happy with your decision, you can explain the rationale, and I did the best I could. I think people understand that. I have a lot of faith in the citizens to make good decisions if they have good options. And I'm the best option as an independent candidate. Now, I know Gary seems to be taking some offense that I keep harping on him for being a Republican, but that's what happens when you're a Republican. You can't run as a Republican and then serve not as a Republican. That's just the way it is.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I think that the at-large seat is exactly that. It's the at-large seat. It's not the Western Loudoun seat. You need to understand the needs of both Western Loudoun and Eastern Loudoun and all the communities that are there. I have traveled across this county to meet with lots of different people, and I'll tell you, it's been eye-opening at some level. Honestly, I've driven past certain areas and gone and met and door knocked and met with folks in eastern Loudoun, and it was eye-opening to realize the disparity between certain parts of eastern Loudoun and what I see in Leesburg, and when I go out to Hamilton and when I go out to Purcellville. It is a night and day difference. You have to be out there with people, understanding what their needs are, because if you talk to those two groups of people, they're going to have very different concerns that are important to them. So I like the idea, and I agree with the town halls, but it's more than just town halls. You actually have to go out there and talk to the people proactively, not just in information sessions. You have to invite them to be part of the dialogue and on a regular basis.
Thank you.
So,
Your time is up.
This question's on Metro. Regardless of whether you agree with the decision a decade ago to bring the Silver Line to Loudoun County, Metro is here. The county's Metro stations open as ridership system-wide was down significantly, and Metro faces a fiscal cliff next year. Was bringing Metro to Loudoun a mistake? What, if anything, should the county do to contribute to Metro's operating budget? Is investing in Metro's future a good investment for Loudoun County?
yeah, so Norm, I think that's a really good question. I think that, to your point, whether I agree with it or not is somewhat irrelevant. It's here, right? So we have this infrastructure that's available for us to make use of, and the question is, do we continue to invest in it, or do we let it languish? It is facing a fiscal cliff right now. We cover about 7% of overall Metro costs. We've got, with a 3% year-over-year uplift that's associated with that, and we need to take advantage of it. We need to build up those urban areas around it to actually put in mixed-use facilities and housing and commercial, so that we can start getting better tax revenue out of that, and we can attract people to live there and be accessible to the Metro. The Metro attracts talent from other areas to Loudoun. We need to leverage Metro to encourage tourism within Loudoun County. We talk about our agricultural tourism economy all the time, but Metro's a big piece of that. Why aren't we pushing that message out into other counties and making folks come out this way? Because, hey, they've got a straight shot all the way out to Loudoun County, and provide incentives for businesses to perhaps run shuttles or, provide transportation from the Metros to their wineries, to the breweries, to the equestrian farm, to wherever it is. Metro is absolutely something that we should be investing in, because to not invest in it would just let it languish, and that would serve no purpose whatsoever. We should 100% be making use of Metro in order to improve the economic commercial base in Loudoun County and to diversify it.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thanks. So, as it's worked out with the project being many years behind, with the whole dynamics of different people's commutes, it's easy to say now that Metro was a mistake, but, we're stuck with it now. And it's a good example of where you don't always know what's going to happen in the future. So, like, I ran for the Board of Supervisors 4 years ago, but there weren't any questions about COVID back then, because that was an unforeseen thing. So to me, that's part of why it's so important to have independent representation on the board that's not beholden to any special interests, because you never know what's going to come up. Now, we have the Metro. We need to make the best of it, but that's a good example of, like, the Rivanna development that's along the Metro.
Sam, your time is up.
I'll get into that later. Thanks.
Loudoun County has experienced what many have described as an affordable housing crisis. And the county's own affordable housing report from last year indicated that the Affordable Dwelling Unit program won't address this problem fully. Many county employees and even employees in the private sector can't afford to live in the county where they work. What, if anything, more should the board be doing to address this issue, and what specific ideas do you have to advance affordable housing in Loudoun County?
Thanks. So like I was saying, we have this Rivanna development that's at a Metro station, And it's like, oh man, we need to approve this development to make the best use of Metro. There's an affordable housing component in it. So it's like, the board's like, oh man, we have to approve this project. Okay, they're like, well, how about we pay you tens of millions of dollars less than we should? And they're like, okay, great. Now, do you consider that supporting Metro? Because I don't. It's just every single development is just a developer giveaway, because you're put in this position where you almost have to approve it because you need that money coming in. You need to make the best of Metro. But it's so important with the timing. Like if that project is not ready to, we want it to happen and we want it to work out, but if it's not the right timing, then it could be a real disaster. So we'll see how that one works out. And like I mentioned, affordable housing is a part of that, and it's a problem, but it's become another way that it's become a developer scam where they can just sprinkle in a few affordable affordable dwelling units for a whole bunch of additional units that aren't affordable. Now, for each one of those, you need teachers, firemen, police. That adds to the number of people that need affordable dwelling units. So the board's approach to addressing affordable housing has actually been making the problem worse.
I'm afraid your time is up.
So I think the affordable housing crisis is very legitimate. We, the people who make Loudoun County work, who are teachers, our county employees, our police officers, our firefighters, our first responders, they should be able to live in the county that they support and that supports us. We have the unmet housing needs strategic plan within the county. I think that's a good thing. The affordable dwelling units, the challenge with those, to my opinion, is that they expire, number one, and number two, they become prohibitively expensive for developers to create. They do it at such a loss that there's a disincentive for developers to go and actually make them. And the zoning ordinance rewrite is in fact going to make that worse. So if we want to solve the affordable housing crisis within Loudoun County, we need to look at, one, the ZOR. Two, we need to be able to look at the ADU program and see, should we up the percentages a little bit, and how do we make it more cost effective for developers to make them? And three, invest in a thriving rental community for young families or young professionals who are just entering the workforce so that they can actually afford to live.
And your time is up.
The present Board of Supervisors have from time to time voted on resolutions regarding outside issues not specific to Loudoun County. Is this an appropriate action of the board, or should the board limit its official actions to only those affecting all the residents of Loudoun County?
Yeah, so I don't agree with resolutions that are outside the scope of Loudoun County. Now, I'm not going to say that I disagree with resolutions as a whole. If a kid wins the national spelling bee, if someone performs a heroic act, if we have people that we want to recognize, right, in the community, I think resolutions to that end are very good. That's something that, frankly, local government should do. I got recognized when I was a kid by the city of Philadelphia for one of my accomplishments. That was wonderful, and I put it onto one of my college resumes. That's all fine, well, and good. We shouldn't be veering into national politics or things that stray outside the scope of the Board of Supervisors. This is local politics, and that's where we need to keep it. And much to Sam's point, that's what's going to keep the political aspect out of local politics. We don't want to veer into national headlines because it's got nothing to do with the administration of Loudoun County.
Yes, I largely agree with Gary there, but I would go a step further and say no proclamations, resolutions at all. It's easy to say, recognize a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout or whatever, not controversial, but then you have one that is a problem and it's like, oh, why is this controversial? You really can't win with that situation, so I think it has to be an all or nothing thing. And I say no proclamations. And sorry to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts out there. But they could always get a recognition from the chairperson. I'd be happy to give that. Individual members of the Board of Supervisors could give recognition. But it's not, the board shouldn't be, they spend hours bickering about this kind of thing. and it's so pointless. There's no action whatsoever.
Your time is up, Mr. Roy.
Let's jump back into one more land use question we looked over. TDRs, transfer development rights. Should the next board implement a transfer of development rights program wherein data center developers building in Eastern Loudoun may purchase additional by right floor area ratio and/or building height credits by paying landowners in Western Loudoun to give up development rights on their land? Would you support implementing a TDR program as a top priority for the new board? Why or why not?
No, I definitely would not support that type of TDR program. Nobody wants to preserve rural Loudoun more than I do. That's a big chunk of the reason that I'm running for office. But I can't think of hardly a more unfair way to do it. It makes no sense to me at all. A transfer of development rights, you're taking rights from one place, that's the taking area, they get a benefit. You're taking them somewhere else, that's called the receiving area, that's bringing more density that no one in Loudoun wants that anywhere. So you're penalizing that area. Now, what's the connection between the two? I can make a good argument that preserving rural Loudoun has the cost savings, where there's huge cost savings, so it benefits everybody. I'm all about preserving rural Loudoun, and I can make a great case for why that's important for all of Loudoun. The time limitations of this debate tonight, I'm not going to be able to get into it, but there are huge cost savings. But what's the connection between the benefit in rural Loudoun, as much as I would like to get that, but it's totally unfair to send all those rights to somewhere else with more data centers down there. It's totally unfair. And it gets to the point where with these party politicians, it's almost like you can't trust them to do most anything right. It really seems like it's kind of set up to be just another developer scam to me.
So I actually generally agree with Sam on this one. I don't love the TDR concept. I think that the Eastern Loudoun doesn't want that, and certainly it benefits Western Loudoun. But I'm not against the idea of TDR if used in a way that would be conducive in a way that hasn't been used. I don't love the west to east notion of it so much. I wouldn't forego it if it were in a special exception circumstance. But there are a lot of folks who are in the Ashburn area who don't want more data centers there, but we've got Dulles Cloud South. Maybe there's a way to go and transfer certain development rights that are in that area down to Dulles Cloud South area so that you could actually, appease resident concerns and then actually still have data center development in an area that's not near residential localities so that you could still benefit. It's a win-win. You could benefit from the revenue and also appease the residents who are in that area that don't want that type of development near their homes. So the idea, if used appropriately, can be effective.
All right. Last question. The Board of Supervisors is made up of 9 individuals coming from different parties, different areas of the county. They have different priorities. The chair, often what he or she does is reconcile those different personalities and try to bring them together and get things done. So how will you, as chair, work with this diverse board, diverse in many ways, to get things done for Loudoun County?
So one of the things I'm probably most known for, respected for within the business community is my ability to pull people together and get things done. I've done that professionally. I've done that here in Loudoun County. I've pulled Phyllis Randall into a room with people whom she disagrees with, and I encouraged her to go and do that because it was the right thing to do for the county. It took some doing, but eventually that happened. Did that with other supervisors as well. One of my, and I say this with as much humility, as humbly as I can, one of my gifts is being able to communicate, but also being able to appeal to a diverse group of people who may not necessarily all agree. When I lead people, professionally, I lead through, the way that I like to be led. I like to be led by people whom I respect, whom I would work incredibly hard for, not because I feared what would happen to me if I failed them, but because I didn't want to let them down. Right? I will work 100 times harder for someone who I know, like, and trust versus someone who it may be more divisive and for whom rules through fear. So that is my style of management, generally speaking. That doesn't always mean that I'm a consensus builder. Sometimes, there's a saying from an old CEO I worked with, I'm first among equals, right? It means I want to hear everybody's input, but at the end of the day, I make the decision. I want to hear everybody's input, but at the end of the day, if we can't reach consensus, a decision does have to be made, and I'm not afraid to make that decision, but I do solicit feedback.
Thank you. Time is up.
Well, that's interesting because all those nice things that Gary says he's known for, I'm actually known for all those same things. Isn't that crazy? But it's funny that he mentions, he'll take input, but then he makes the decision because as the chairman, you're not the president of the board. You're actually just one vote of 9 people. So it's a lot of a different dynamic than maybe he's used to. It's kind of more the dynamic that I'm used to, herding goats around all the time. They want to go this way, that way. I think that the board is going to be a lot easier to get a handle on and lead in a productive direction than my herd of goats, let me tell you. But to get back to that, the TDR question, Gary actually brought up a good point where there is some potential for TDR to move data center rights from one place to another, but I am totally against moving them into the transition area like he suggested. But there is potential for right now.
And
your
time is up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
Save that for the closing.
That does bring us to the end. I want to thank both of you. I know.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I just want to say a couple of things first. But I want to thank you all for being here. But I want you all to recognize that these gentlemen have put their names forward to run for office. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not a comfortable thing to do. Both of them care enough about the county that they wanted to put their names forward. So I think we need to give them a round of applause. And gentlemen, you do have 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. Sam, you start with the closing statement.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks again to Colt, Loudoun Now, Loudoun Times Mirror, everybody for coming out. My opponent, Gary. I guess thanks to Chair Brindle for running again, even though she couldn't make it out tonight. Now, to get back to what I was saying about the data centers, there is potential that you could, right now there's data centers that are allowed in areas that are right next to residential where we totally don't want them, but there's some other areas that they're allowed where it's not near anywhere, so I could see TDR is not an entirely bad idea, where if you set it up right, it does have some potential. Now, it's just so important, it's so hard with the 90 seconds, 60 seconds to talk about every issue that folks have. I would really want to encourage everybody to reach out to me, sam4chairman@gmail.com, sam4chairman.com. Please reach out to me. Let me know the issues you're concerned with. I want to hear them, and I can help you out. Whatever your issue is, I can guarantee you that the root cause of it is these two parties that are just causing all kinds of problems. They can't do anything right because they have too much fun fighting with each other all the time. So for the most part, we have the big issue of development. That's the #1 issue. I'm the best candidate on that. It's not a partisan issue. A lot of this partisan bickering is distracting from that issue. So while they're fighting about proclamations over here, they're doing the developer giveaways over here. That's the biggest problem. But there are actually some issues that we're dealing with that deal with this partisanship. But it does seem like that they have so much fun fighting that they just do it incessantly. They never solve any problems. So as your independent chairman, I'll actually bring these other 8 people on the board together, and we can cut through all this partisan BS and really get down to what is this issue about? How can we actually try solving a problem once in a while? So much of the time, all the incentive for the parties is just to continue the issue going on, endlessly festering, because it gives them something to fight about all the time, raise money on, and
Sam,
agitate their partisans. And
your time is
thanks
up.
again, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
I'll use part of this time to actually address a fair criticism that Sam gave, which is my comment on leadership style does not directly correlate to a Board of Supervisors. That's accurate. But as chairman of the Board of Supervisors, you are responsible for helping to drive and get things done. So that was the intent of that message. But that was a fair point that you brought up. A chairman does not unilaterally make decisions across the board. I agree. The first rule of serving others is to not serve yourself, right? That's what we've seen from this board. My commitment to you is that I am going to serve this county as its chairman for the full term, the full 4 years. I also, when I moved here, never thought I'd have to make the following promise, because I do make promises. I promise I will never steal your money. I will say it again. I will never steal public money and use it for personal self-benefit. That is just errantly wrong. It is offensive to decency, to honesty, integrity. It's a betrayal of the public trust, and we should never have that happen in Loudoun County again. Now, if you're running for at-large, you need to be representative of the entire county, not just one particular locality. You need to understand the delicate balance between the needs of constituents as well as the economic needs in order to keep taxes lower and have a thriving business community. You have to facilitate affordable housing so the people who support our community and make it work for us can actually be part of the community, that they actually have some investment in Loudoun County themselves. And most importantly, if I were to say one piece here, it should not require a gubernatorial executive order or a special grand jury report or media exposés in order to achieve transparency and accountability in Loudoun County. We need to be able to self-regulate that on our own, which is why an Office of the Inspector General will be a top priority with my leadership, to be able to make sure that we have a watchdog group that is looking out for malfeasance within Loudoun County. I'm happy to put my skills to work for Loudoun County. I deal with state and local entities professionally. I work with their human services groups. I work with their accounting. I work with their legal groups. I'm happy to invest that here in Loudoun County and put my skills to work if you'll hire me. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And finally, I would like to thank the questioners that went and asked such provocative questions and made it very interesting. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it very much.